This is Brianna McIntyre, 1800 through 1860 Territorial Expansion Podcast. In the late 1700s, the South was faced with a weakening economy because of depressed prices, unmarketable products, and more importantly, overcropped lands. But that was all about to change with the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793. Not only did the cotton gin make things easier by producing more cotton in less time, but it rejuvenated the southern economy. Fast profits then brought people to the South. Plantation owners were the aristocracy of the South, and they spent their money on more slaves and more land. But fertile land in the South couldn't last forever. Many plantation owners started to expand past their boundaries farther west with their crops. Others sold their plantations altogether and moved west to find other opportunities. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson sent James Monroe to Paris to purchase New Orleans because he was worried Napoleon would take over. He wanted to secure the port from the British and French so that America could be superior and have more trading power. With ownership of New Orleans, America could trade up and down the Mississippi River and connect the West to the rest of the world. The French foreign minister instead gave all of the Louisiana Territory to America for $15 million. Jefferson was worried that the purchase wasn't constitutional, but the treaty more than doubled the size of the U.S. Then, in 1804, Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the northern parts of the Louisiana Purchase. The Lewis and Clark expedition started in St. Louis, Missouri, went through the Rocky Mountains, and down the Columbia River to the Pacific coast. Once Lewis and Clark arrived back to the east, everyone was enthused by their discoveries. Missionaries, fur traders, and pioneers would then be inspired to start their new life in the West. The expedition helped the Monroe administration negotiate the Treaty of 1818. This treaty permitted Americans to share land along the 49th parallel to the Rocky Mountains with Britain. The Oregon Territory was occupied by the U.S. and Britain peacefully for 10 years. In the Florida Purchase Treaty of 1819, Spain ceded Florida as well as some parts of Oregon to the United States. Spain wanted the exchange for America's abandonment claim to Texas. Spain rulers sent troops to Florida to fight the rebels. Indians, runaways, and slaves would run across the border into America, burning land while scalping and killing many American citizens. Andrew Jackson then went to Florida to find revenge in 1818. He executed many Indians and British subjects because they were alliance with Spain. Spain finally gave up and gave Florida to America. The Missouri Compromise was an agreement passed in 1820 between the pro-slavery and anti-slavery citizens in the U.S. Congress, involving the regulation of slavery in the Western Territories. It prohibited slavery in the former Louisiana Territory north of the parallel 3630, except within the boundaries of the state of Missouri. Prior to the agreement, the House of Representatives had refused to accept this compromise, and a conference committee was appointed. This made the southern cotton plantation owners happy because they would be able to have slavery in fertile areas that grows cotton easily. Texas was declared an independent country and was called the Lone Star Republic. Both England and Mexico wanted Texas. Texas even became a hot debate in the 1844 campaign in America. Tyler wanted to acquire Texas while the Democrats believed it would be an advantage to pro-slavery Southerners. After a debate in Congress, Tyler's resolution passed in 1845, and Texas became the 28th state in America. This led to the constant threat of war between Mexico and the U.S. because Mexico accused America of stealing Texas from them. But in all reality, Texas didn't belong to Mexico any longer, and it belonged to the United States fair and square. The Mormon pioneer movement began in 1846. The Mormons were faced with conflicts with neighbors. Brigham Young, the leader, decided to abandon Nauvoo and to establish a new home for the church in the West. In 1847, Young led the Vanguard Company to the Salt Lake Valley, which was then outside the boundaries of the United States and later became Utah. The Mormons couldn't be harassed anymore for practicing their religion because they were outside of U.S. territory. Beginning in 1846, Mexico and the U.S. went to war over the American ownership of Texas. Finally, in 1848, Mexico gave up and ceded a large amount of land to the U.S. This was called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and it ended the Mexican-American War. To the U.S., this massive land grab was significant because the question of extending slavery into newly acquired territories had become the leading national political issue. So there was a lot of debate over whether or not states like California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Nevada would be a slavery state or not. To Mexico, the loss of an enormous part of its territory was a tremendous embarrassment and created lasting anger among many of its citizens. In January 1848, James Wilson Marshall discovered gold while constructing a sawmill along the American River northeast of present-day Sacramento. The discovery was reported in the San Francisco newspapers in March, but caused little stir as most did not believe the account. But once Sam Brennan found gold at Sutter's Creek, the gold frenzy hit the east. People packed their bags and left their old lives behind in the east and moved west. People had no idea how scary and dangerous their route was to California. Many died before arriving on the Pacific coast. The 1849 gold rush made the West Coast burst with cities and gold mining towns. In January 1854, Senator Stephen Douglas introduced a bill that divided the land west of Missouri into two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. He argued for popular sovereignty, which would allow the settlers of the new territories to decide if slavery would be legal there. The Kansas-Nebraska Act passed on May 30, 1854. The decision started conflict that turned violent and resulted in a split between North and South. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was a big component in the start of the Civil War. In 1853, the United States negotiated with Mexico to resolve the boundary dispute, which resulted at the termination of the Mexican War and to purchase the land in question. This was known as the Gadsden Purchase. The region was the size of present-day southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico, which was purchased by the U.S. in a treaty signed by President Franklin Pierce on June 24, 1853, and ratified by the U.S. Senate on April 25, 1854.